this is actually just adjusting all this stuff and seeing you do this like reminds me, I made the decision to start Umvelt when I was in Tokyo, Japan with this Finnish guy, Teemu, that I met, and we were recording the last final two concerts of this Japanese psychedelic folk band, Kikigaku Moyo. And I was going to Sento's in Tokyo, and I was like applying for jobs. I had finished grad school studying energy systems modeling, and it was kind of a hybrid degree of economics and energy modeling, hoping to be part of kind of the, renewables movement. But I was just like not excited about being on the computer, and I was going to these Sentos, and I was like, oh, I should just finally do this in Bozeman.
What year was that?
That would have been end of 2022. So yeah, December 2022. Because this is like 3-year mark from forming the LLC for the company that became Umvelt. So
and we are rolling. So
we are.
If you want all that in there,
yeah, sure, yeah.
We'll just go wherever. But yeah, just.
But yeah, it seemed like, I don't know. I just think that's is kind of a funny situation where this. I was in Japan with a Finnish guy and decided to start a sauna business or a bathhouse business. So, yeah, that would have been end of 2022, 2023. But to answer your question, both my parents are engineers. So my dad's a PE mechanical engineer. My mom was a civil engineer. And I've always had like kind of like a complex where I'm like, oh, like I like never could quite get, like an engineering degree. Yeah. So I'm like, come from like a technical family, but I'm not truly necessarily a technical person, but I really like to learn, and I'm fascinated by, I ended up getting very deep in the systems. Kind of, I don't know if it was like by choice or by necessity, but that ended up being one of my favorite parts about like figuring out how to build a bathhouse. It was just like getting really deep in all the mechanical systems and trying to understand the way the building would actually function, and like fusing that with the art and design of the space.
And you're talking about the systems, meaning like the plumbing and everything. That's
yeah. I mean, plumbing, HVAC, the saunas, auto dosers, ventilation's huge. So, and then also thinking about like all the, technology that goes in. So lighting, access controls, kind of just like understanding every system in the building to hopefully deliver like a seamless customer experience, and employee experience. So,
I think of that when I'm there, and I feel like I'm so exclusive because you showed me behind that employee only door. I'm like, it basically looks like a submarine engine room back there.
Yeah.
It's so Can you speak to that whole complexity of what it took to, to get the water and all the systems where they are?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely fairly non-linear. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot, like before coming to this podcast, was kind of like in business, my experience has been that I'm kind of like on this pendulum where I'll like make a decision and then often like overreact and go to the other extreme. So when I started, I was like, this is going to be like fully outsourced to consultants, like all the, systems, like I'm, just going to like trust the experts. And largely that's like, I think like is the right way to go with all this stuff. But I was like, oh, maybe I don't need to like understand every piece of it. And then it turned out that I, at least on like the operations and how everything ties together, did. So, I started out and was like, I'm just going to like hire, like a bathhouse building or whatever, sauna building consultant, and learned a lot because they start to give you insights about, the size of the equipment and the power needed. But also, I think if you don't understand like exactly what it is you're trying to build and actually how much square footage is required for that, and then if you don't understand the like water supply and power requirements, this is like something that almost needs to be involved like at the earliest phase of finding the real estate. So, I found this like amazing building in downtown Bozeman. I was like, oh, this is so great. But like, it turns out we had a, 3/4 inch water supply, which was like way undersized. The power supply was, like still 120. So we had to go up to, 600 amp, 208 three-phase power, and then also improve the water supply to a 2-inch water line. So stuff like that like was totally unforeseen complexity, just because I like didn't know which questions to ask at the beginning. And so, um, finding that stuff out definitely like was a real shock. But so that's one piece of advice I would definitely have for anyone trying to do something like this is like have the mechanical consultants in at the earliest phase, even if it's like a sunk cost up front. So like when you're looking, I think any kind of like big renovation project, like bring in the mechanical engineers at the very earliest phase, because that would have saved us a lot of heartache later. But yeah, on this like pendulum, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm gonna have these people design everything, and maybe I'll have like a little bit of say on layout. And it turns out that like one of the things of working with um, mechanical engineers is that a lot of them will, for the HVAC, plumbing, pool layout, whatever, they'll make suggestions that are like based on what you want and based on maybe what's like easily attainable on the budget. But these things have huge impacts on the flow of the space. And so I do think that like including them at the earliest phase and trying to stay in the process as the design gets done so that you make sure you get what you want.
I guess in a lot of senses, you really have to build around those mechanical requirements because I mean, without that, you can't have the right water flow or the right airflow, and then so you kind of take that, and then that's your template to do architecture and design layout around. If
Yeah.
I'm understanding that right.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that like in certain situations it could, really limit exactly what you put in the building. So,
So you're saying get that stuff sorted out ahead of time because that might even tell you in a lot of ways this could be the wrong building or
yeah,
this is going to be the upfront cost just for the mechanical, and then you've got to make your dream bathhouse around this
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
structure.
So I think that was, and, I think the constraints also do, lend themselves. Like, if you travel this country and go to a lot of the great bathhouses, part of our decision to like do this in this weird, 1936 Fred Wilson building in downtown Bozeman is that like it does have this basement space, and a lot of the coolest like Russian style banyas in this country are like down in basements, and the layout's funky, and that actually gives them a lot of character. So I think there are a lot of benefits too to like working with the space you have, in terms of creating something that's like holds up over time, where you go there and you're like, oh, this one's so different. Like I didn't expect it to be like that. So I think it's like kind of like a yes and. It's like, but if I could do things over, I would bring in the engineers a lot earlier, but also be way more involved in asking questions like at the early phase to really understand, you know, what's possible, and and what those trade-offs are in terms of like, putting a pool here, or, there's just like really, you get into like really nitty gritty things with code in terms of like clearances and, access and all sorts of things. So, um, yeah, I think, but your question was like going through that engine room. And I think like one of the really, the other big challenges, of any type of project like this, especially if you're not from like a construction management background, or honestly, like I didn't really have any background in this. So is coordination between all these groups. So like to create a space like this, like even if you know um did know what you're doing, like you're coordinating between a mechanical uh engineer for the plumbing, HVAC, those are often two different people. The pool engineer, state health board, electrical engineer. You've got all these different, the architect, then your contractors, and there's different contractors for each of those. And so the coordination between all these groups, and then interior design, I guess less so in the mechanical space, but um, you know, all of these things like have to come together, and there's all these points of communication between these different groups. So it's a huge coordination effort to pull all that off and have it work. And luckily, and then you've got like this inspections and the city. And so I think that like a great starting point for something like that room though is like having your like minimum square footage possible, because if you're trying to fit all of that in there and still have it function and be able to use it and have people work around each other, um, you have to allocate more space to things that are back of house than you'd expect.
Yeah, because that mechanical room's pretty big back there.
Yeah, I think it's like 415 square feet. And so that's one of those things, we worked with a company called Bradford Wellness at the early phase for some of this kind of um, almost went down the direction there. They can be like a full service pool builder, and they actually build saunas off site and put them in. And it's interesting talking to some of the other, and listening to some of the other like modern bathhouse builders. A lot of them, did their first one with a company like Bradford Wellness or Design for Leisure. There's these companies that really specialize in building these spaces out. And then, the bottom line is these groups are really expensive, and they're really good at like deploying their systems, but maybe it's more work to try to get them to like do something your way. And so then I think a lot of people like start with them, do one, and then if people are growing, they like do the next one themselves, and then almost all of them go back to using one of these like end to end pool and sauna builders. And so that's just kind of an interesting thing to watch, where I started by talking to them, and they gave some like really great advice about like minimum square footage for XYZ thing. And I also like at the very beginning, when I was just like, this was just an idea, I did a bunch of traveling around the country and would go to different bathhouses, and I was like, I don't know. I think at the time, like my imposter syndrome, which is like still strong, was so strong that I was like, oh, I'm not going to like reach out to these people first. I'm just going to go like visit these bathhouses. And I was like pacing the buildings. So I'd like pace the floor plan,
Taking measurements.
take measurements, and then go like write down, and created like a whole spreadsheet of, what kind of square footage was allocated on, and then I'd go to their websites and figure out the capacities and try to like reverse engineer and figure out like how much of the different things was being allocated in these spaces that did feel really good and did flow really well. So that's all the kind of stuff that goes into like trying to create, I think, a functional bathhouse. There's probably easier and faster ways to do it by just like calling people. So
Yeah, I told you, Kyle. Me and Kyle went to the one in Coeur d'Alene, and I don't know if you'd call it a traditional bathhouse, but it had these small individual saunas, and then it had single person cold plunges. And I wouldn't call it a bathhouse by probably most bathhouse definitions and standards. And it was a very different experience. It was not that community experience, which I think you put a big emphasis on. And it really is, when you're doing that with a community, especially the local community here, it has a very profound effect on the entire experience.
yeah. I mean, that's probably where we should have started, which is like the like why do this
Yeah,
at
yeah.
all?
And that's where I wanted to get back to,
yeah.
because you
Sorry.
said you were in Japan.
Yeah.
And what's the bathhouse scene in Japan? Does it exist?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like there's kind of like, a couple famous modes there. So probably the most famous is like the onsen, which is specifically, my understanding is like specifically is like a natural water hot spring. Those are often found at something called a ryokan, which is like a traditional hotel that has an onsen at it. So if you're like skiing over there, a lot of the hotels are, ryokans, and you go back and fairly traditional generally at those ones. Or like like some of my favorite ones I went to, they'll be like after 3 p.m., like you're wearing traditional garb. They give you like a special robe to go down to the bathhouse space. Gender segregated. often no tattoos. So there's kind of like rules around this that, give you these really cool small like printed towels with, the name of the space on it. And you go around and like there's if you just go and watch, like you pick up pretty quick. There's like an order of operations between like cleaning yourself with these little seated showers and then enjoying the different amenities and um, great. I mean, they're so great. And then the other side of that is like the Ascento would be more of like a man-made bathhouse. So that's like more of what you'd find in a city. And they're very much like talked about as two different things. Although my understanding is that in Tokyo, there are potentially a few onsens where they use fracking technology to get natural water, like hot water in an urban space. So, but the community aspect, I think, is like um, really shines through there. I mean, although it is tends to be gender segregated, very intergenerational. Those tend to be quiet, focused spaces where of deep relaxation. Um, Whereas I think that I'd say that's a theme in a lot of these shared traditions of social sweating. But like the Russian style banya, which is like really like that was the inspiration for Umvelt, is like tends to be a little more social on certain nights. If you go to Archimedes in San Francisco, which I think is the best one in the country, and the team there was like really really generous with information. So if anyone's building one of these, call Chad at Archimedes. They're the best, but those tend to be more social and have the kind of cafe component, which we were also inspired by. So you have kind of like this integration space with nourishment, and um, and then the Finns as well. Like that tends to be Tammy was telling me like a big thing is like sauna talk, and it's actually a place for kind of like storytelling and also business. And so the way that this like community expresses itself, I think, is like very different based on culture and geography. And I think though that the power of just being in intense heat and cold around other people, there's like something about it that is really magical. There's thousands of years of history um, behind this in all sorts of different traditions. Roman baths, Turkish hammam, Russian banya, Japanese sento, Finnish sauna, the Native American sweat lodge. So um, the why of like why do this, I guess, is like I think every town and community should have a great place to sweat together, and we're lucky we have a lot in this valley already. The Bozeman Hot Springs is an incredible spot. I've been a member out there forever. Norris is great. Chico's great. We've got all these natural hot springs, and then other spaces like Ben Beyond, the hot yoga studio. So like it's not that we don't have any of these spaces, it's just that um I think there's always room for more. And we really love like this Russian banya inspired bathhouse, which is like centered on high heat, high humidity sauna and cold plunge, and then having some relaxation space and integration space. So
I've joked for years, and I've gone to the Bozeman hot springs for years, but I say that, man, I think in that sauna is where
yeah.
all bro science originates.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the conversation there is sometimes it's hysterical, sometimes it's surprising, and it's everywhere in between. It's always a very diverse group of people depending on
Hmm.
time of day and time of week. When I think of what you've created there's so much intention that it's just different, and in so many ways, and it's very cool. I could not agree more on the community feel, and the sharing that sweat and that struggle together, and that I thought it from the first time I went. What a great place for like I'm part of some different business masterminds and different groups, and have some of the guys come there and just maybe talk about business, or maybe don't, and maybe just relax there. But it's really, I would say, psychedelic in a way, the way that you feel when you walk in that door to walk back out, you literally kind of transcend reality because almost instantly you forget you're in Bozeman, and then you walk back outside. And I'm pretty good at remembering my sunglasses now because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
gets you. But it was so intentional, and I have so much props for what that space is. But it's got this sacredness to it that I can feel, and it's just very cool.
Hi, folks. Quick note from me. If you don't already know, the goal of Mountain Mule Media is to build real connection between Montana's businesses and the people they serve. If this episode or any other has given you something worth thinking about, smiling at, or passing along, I've got a small ask. Share it with a friend, text it to someone, post it in your story. That one simple action helps these businesses get seen, grow, and thrive, and it helps this show keep going. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses. Now back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Ali McQuaid, Future Studio, our interior designer, deserves a ton of credit. I think, it was always the goal to create a space where you kind of like stepped in there and could leave your day to day, like speed of life and, racing mind, whatever, leave that behind and step somewhere and be transported. And she really knocked it out of the park on a million fronts. She's just like the best in the business and just such an incredible talent. And I think that like, yeah, it really means a lot hearing you say that. And thinking about like the hot springs, like that's an incredibly hot sauna, and it has a real community. Like you gotta give the Bozeman Hot Springs 10 out of 10 for community. There's people that are there like 5 days a week. You go different times a day. There's like the same groups of people. They have all these great things going on, and so I definitely was like striving to do something different, and just by being in town and leaning really hard on the like design of the space, and I think that like one of the things that we're trying to do is like uh, now that we're in operations, got the space designed, is like figure out how to program the space so that different folks can opt into the experience they're looking for. So like if you are looking for a time to go kind of have like that, chat business with your mastermind group, like we'll have more social hours where you can really go do that, but then we're going to try to program for quiet times and more reflective times so that you can kind of like opt into whatever you're looking for. And I think that that's like this is like a premium product. It's it is a time commitment. So at the end of the day, like we're kind of competing with like everyone's like what they're going to do with their free time, and that money that's spent on other experiences. And so we want to create a space where like we're somewhat like de-risking, where you're like there and you're gonna like be able to have that kind of like transcendental experience you're looking for. So I think that's like the really exciting stuff now, is like now that it's built, is like how do we activate this space. And on the community front, the way I've been thinking about and talking about is like I think it's like really hard to like make community, but I think hopefully we've like created a vessel where like community can like emerge on its own. So I think hopefully by creating this different programming, and people can opt into an experience that they really want. Hopefully we do get those like heavy, use regulars, and people start to, and we have some of that already, but that kind of like community where people feel a ownership over the space, and that it's part of their identity, starts to emerge here. But we've only been open for 3 months, so it's all quite fresh.
I think somebody said that. I was going to say I thought it was your staff, but I think it was just somebody that I was talking to when I was in the bathhouse. I think it's a brilliant idea because, yeah, there is that time when you want to have that conversation, and there's definitely that time where myself and I think everyone there wants to close their eyes and meditate, to do their thing. And I think that optionality of knowing when those windows are is probably very appealing to a lot of people, because I've thought of this. I don't know if you've had inquiries yet, but I'm getting married later this end of summer, and when the wedding party's in town, or bachelor parties, I mean, how cool would it be if you reserve the whole space for your group for 2 hours, and then it's like a real family thing. And I wonder if you'll have people do that for corporate groups
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and it's the community thing, I feel like I've probably said this 1,000 times and harped on it forever because I got really into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a little over 5 years ago. And that I was able to build really great community, great friendships. And it is interesting. Some group things here, it's not as easy to do that. Obviously, you'll kind of get back the effort you put in, but some of those group classes, you do the whole group class together, and you're listening to the instructor, and then you leave, say a yoga class or any type of fitness class, and there's not really that time for conversation. And that's what I found in the jujitsu community is we're always talking kind of during, pre, and post, and really built friendships. And I think this is this is a prime environment for that exact same thing because I've had half a dozen random conversations with people I'd never met in there, and I've had a dozen conversations with people I know in the community. I'm like, oh, what's up, man? I'm like, this is cool. Like, there's so many different people I've ran into there, and it was just very cool. I'm like, oh, these are half of these people are my kind of people anyway, and they're coming here. I'm coming here. This all makes sense.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think that there's something about like that. I think the conditions of social sauna, bathhouse, etc. Like because it's slow in nature, and we do allocate like you can stay up to 2 hours or and stretch that a little bit. I think because it's this slower practice, that there's a lot of time to like bump in and end up in the same part of the building as someone else, or you could go upstairs. And I think that, yeah, it does in some ways, like, we put a lot of effort, I think, into creating, I actually, didn't realize this, but, my partner Jenny and I, we kind of stole this term sweat etiquette from Bend Beyond, which is like, our code of conduct and kind of like how we're hoping that our guests and participants relate to the space and to each other. The goal is like, these are things like, you know, kind of the mechanics of being in this space. So, we emphasize this to everyone on their first visit, but also give reminders with signage and things like that. So, showering, sitting on towels, things like that are related to, keeping the space clean and keeping the water fresh for other guests, but other things too, just like about, interpersonal safety. So creating a really open channel where if anyone's uncomfortable, like that's coming straight to the people on staff. We've got reporting around that. Really being conscious about, I stole this phrase from, I think, like the best community sauna in the business, but which is the community sauna baths in London. And they talk about like body neutrality. So that's not commenting on bodies, tattoos, swimsuits, anything like that. Like even if, they have a line in there that's like, even if it's meant in a positive way. And so by like really being forward about, what the kind of like code of conduct and expectations are, hopefully creating a really safe feeling space so that the combination of like effort into, having like the best mechanical systems in, the business and, working so hard on creating like a really relaxing space with, art and design and lighting, and then reinforcing this social element. Like hopefully it's a space where people can like really relax and their guard comes down. And so if it's someone, that or you've seen around town, feeling like confident that like you can like share this space with them and maybe like, deepen or open a connection or deepen a connection. And also, one of our lines is like reading the room. So like picking up on if someone's there and they are in more of like an introverted space, being like, okay, like, yeah, like I can tell that like maybe this isn't the time. But I think one of the things I heard you say was like, oh, like-minded folks. And, definitely one of my like goals with Umvelt was like, Bozeman's such an awesome place. Like, this is really what I should have led the whole thing with. Is like, I built this because like
I can edit this into the beginning.
I just like love Bozeman and this community. And I do think that the community is interesting because we're a space that very much has, or like a location that very much has like a rugged Western outdoors narrative. But Bozeman's actually like the art scene and the creative scene in this town is like unbelievable for a town of 60,000 people. And it's been that way since as long as I can remember. But, I was talking to Eric Funk, who would be a cool person on the podcast, but he's a world-class composer that just like lives below highlight. Like he could be in like any city in the world and have like funny, but he's like lives it. He just like loves cross-country skiing in a tweed jacket in highlight. And he was telling me that, there was an article in like the 80s or 90s in the New York Times about how there was more artists per capita in Bozeman than any other community, like at that time. And I like, it's so true. I mean, you look around and, there's just like so much awesome stuff going on. And my feeling was a little bit that there's not as much overlap between the outdoor community and the creative community. And so creating a space that isn't necessarily based on like a physical activity or, kind of like, it is this space where if you are a skier or a hunter or, any sort of like, outdoor intense activity, it's a space you can go back to and like have your recovery. But also I think it is a space that like celebrates art and creativity and, that part of the community. And so it is not necessarily based on, fitness. And so hopefully like it's a space where, I guess it's like, like-minded people from the standpoint that like you care about, I guess like community health, art quality, like really like, any of those things. So I've seen some of that happening already where it's like, okay, like here's like these two friends that like we've all been friends forever, but we never end up in the same spaces and like we're ending up in the same space again. So from that point of view, like it's been a success so far.
Hell yeah, in a lot of senses, that's the emphasis of this podcast because, and I've realized this getting close to 100 episodes. This place is a melting pot for, you know, artists, creativity, business owners, and I know this was a very cool experience, which I'm gonna say his name, so I'm excited when he listens to this. So, a client of mine, his name is George. He came out here to ski last year. He's in Big Sky right now as we're recording because he's out here this week. And I told him about a year ago, kind of the whole story. Me and my buddy are doing this podcast, and I'm looking for a way to bring it in as part of the company. And he's like, he's like, oh yeah, you have a good radio voice. It makes sense. And so, and it's like a little scratchy now because I was under the weather earlier in the week. But so he, I followed through. I told enough people to keep me accountable, and I sent it out on some emails. And when I picked him up this week, I barely drive anymore, but I made a point to go pick him up because he listens to about every episode, and it's so cool. And he said, listening to that, I feel like I've gotten a really good idea what the community is like, hearing all the different business owners, what people are doing. And I said, George, I think it's literally the tip of the iceberg, at minimum, because every other person I sit down with, they're doing something so cool and it's so creative and so different. And I don't know if it was the last episode prior to this one or two, but this artist came on and she does these bronze sculptures and she's showing the pictures of everything, and it blows my mind just the stuff that people are doing here. And when I look at the Bathhouse in itself is a piece of art, the architecture and the tile work and the music. And so back to what you said, I think the whole community, and I think it has been that way for a long time, and it's very contrasted with the rugged West. And I think that all being molded together makes such a cool community, and such a when that can all, there's obviously there can be division within that, but when all that kind of flows together, it makes such a cool, and what a great meeting place for all those different cultures.
Yeah, and I think when I decided to do this like in Bozeman, I think the thing that's untested about doing a bathhouse somewhere like Bozeman is like on this scale. So, I think that there's like a lot of places that have great sauna businesses with cold plunges, and our hope is that there's like more of that everywhere. I'm not sure how many towns of 60,000 have like a full 5,000 square foot bathhouse, like in the downtown core area. And when you look at, Bozeman's demographics and income stats on paper, it looks something almost kind of like Brooklyn or somewhere like that. But in terms of like the cost of living, but I think that like our statistics are very skewed because we do have this like interesting post COVID migration and remote work, and it's tough to like really get a sense on um what's really going on. And my I kind of I feel like I had the suspicion, and this becomes it's being confirmed. It's like I think for something like this to survive and thrive in Bozeman, it's got to serve, three groups really well. So that's like the locals. And then I think because of COVID, and I only saw the half of that first episode of the TV show, but they use that term transplants.
Yeah.
And tourists. And I think that like, I've lived in the Rockies most of my adult life. I was in Telluride before I was in Bozeman. And there's often kind of like this like us versus them between like the locals and the people that have been here, and then the people that like show up, and then even on the day to day with the tourists. But like really, I think it's like it needs to be a symbiotic relationship between those groups. And so I think it's like a challenging thing to do as a experienced business owner, is like, how do you create something that serves all of those groups and can be authentic in doing it? And so that's what, we're trying to figure out right now. Is like, okay, like, I built this thing that I think definitely, is like, I think it's like very nice and very high end, and will be attractive to tourists and transplants. And then, one of the challenges is like, how do we make this like affordable on the day to day for locals? And so we just rolled out a new membership model that I think makes it like much more attainable for a lot of locals. I mean, it's still a premium product, and we're not competing on price with the natural hot springs. And so at the end of the day, like, we're gonna have to do other things to really create that value for locals. But I think that, like, to your point about your friend George, one of my ideas was like, oh, how can we create a space where like maybe it's not just creating a space where our outdoorsy friends and our artist friends and everyone and our business owner friends and everyone else, and all these spheres overlap, but like where they can all coexist. But like, where's a space where like someone visiting this town can go there and like have a really authentic experience and see the local culture and interact with it in a way that's not exchanged between those groups. So like right now, like, a tourist comes and they go to a restaurant and they maybe get great service, and maybe they have a really great, customer interaction with their barista, and, everyone comments how nice everyone is here. Like, people come visit and they're like, oh my God, like everyone's like, what are you doing today? What's going on? And that is part of why people keep coming back, I think. And then, I think the deeper layer is like a lot of people go have guided experiences. So like, they go out with their like ski guide or fishing guide or, whatever. And that's like, they meet this local, but that,
or Yellowstone Park guide coming summer 2026 from Mountain Mule.
Yes. Let's go. Okay. Yeah. Plug it.
Continue.
But yeah, I think that like, hopefully, I would love to create a space where like, tourists are coming through town, or people that are like second homeowners, whatever, and they go there and they're having authentic interactions with the locals. Because I think that like a lot of what's happening right now in this valley and the surrounding areas is kind of more akin to what's going on in Jackson, where there's like, this kind of like a push to make Bozeman a service hub for gated communities. And my hope is that we're creating something where it's like, no, there's like real overlap here, where like people can rub shoulders with someone that's like not necessarily like they wouldn't run into in their day to day, and instead of creating like partitioned things that don't have any real connective tissue, like something I think that would make our community a lot stronger. So
I couldn't agree more, and it was something I'd really struggled with in past years, and it's like a huge reason why this podcast exists, because of the nature of what we do in our ticket item. It's a premium product. It's expensive, and I felt I was pretty rapidly pricing out most of the local community just of my service, and it's kind of the nature of the industry and what I'm offering. We're serving tourists and high net worth people, and this podcast is like, and I didn't even know half of it was happening, but is my way to give back to the community. And be able to still create these great local relationships and be able to, refer clients to you or to any of these businesses and have that be a two-way street. And it's, for me, I've found so much purpose and meaning in the community connection while still operating a business that does operate on a, it's a premium product. It's expensive. It's not, and I mean, very similar to what you're saying. I'm not competing on price. It's quality of service. And like for us, it's giving people, you know, a high level of hospitality and a true Montana experience. But that at the same time can cut a lot of people out. And that was a little bit heartbreaking. So I love that you're finding a way to mold those. And I was thinking of one specific uh, story. My fiance was there at the hot springs and she was talking to a flight attendant and she's probably just staying downtown for the night. She was just saying she loves the Banya so much. That's where she was talking to her. And she's like, this is so cool. Cause I talk to people in the community. And it's so cool that this is in this town. And I walk here from the hotel and I'm like, that's sick. Cause it's like you really wouldn't expect it in a Western town. And I agree. I think it's such a great place for people to coexist, whether they're coming once, whether they're a second homeowner or they have lived here for the last 30 years.
Hey folks, Tim here with Mountain Mule. I've got a quick announcement I wanted to tie in here. I'm excited this spring 2026. We're officially going to start doing park tours through Yellowstone Park. These will be day tours starting and ending in Bozeman with custom pickup and drop-off locations along the way. We're building out the program now, so there'll be lots of updates coming through, but please keep us in mind if you've used us for transportation in the past. We plan on delivering the same quality of service, and we're excited to be able to expand what we're doing to have a busier summer for the teams and be able to offer more options.
I mean, I love hearing that. Like when these stories get back to me, it feels great. And that's like the fuel to keep going. Selfishly too, like, I mean, I think that was like it is like a little bit improbable, like at this phase. Like, I mean, I think that like in the next 10 years, there's gonna be a major build out. I mean, it's underway. You can, if you're staying read in on kind of like this social wellness space, like the build out's happening, the institutional money's here. But like at this point in time, it's like pretty improbable that something like Umvelt exists in Bozeman. And part of that, like selfishly, was also like, oh, I want to like try to build something like so great that my friends stop moving away, So I've been here, I guess, 11 years. And like definitely one of the big stories for me is like, I form these really good connections and then people like move away for whatever reason. And then a lot of them end up coming back. But like a little bit, I was like, oh, I want to make it like so awesome in this kind of like downtown Bozeman area that people, when they like are thinking about leaving, they're like, oh, I got to think twice. Like where,
It's already hard to do. And when you start compiling more reasons, but I've very similar thing. And I guess I'm coming up on about 7 years here, but it's surprising the friends I've made and then they've moved. And then it is surprising that quite a few of them have come back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that, like people got to do what's right for them. But, selfishly, I'm like, we always knew you were coming back.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? But I get it. And it's dependent on what you're doing. And it's the prices are comparable to a big city. And, there's a lot of nuance to that, but I don't know. Especially with the business owners I've met and the people I've met, the reasons just keep compiling for me to stay in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this before I forget. I think this is a great hack. So me and my fiance are really good about date night, doing it once a week. And I'll say for the last couple of months, a lot of our date nights are Umvelt now. Because for anyone we have awesome food scene here and there's a lot of great places to go. But half the time we're like, let's eat at home and like, let's go spend our money there. And I don't know. There's lots of other great ways to connect with your significant other, but that way is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a vibe. We've done it so much in it. I don't know, even if you're comparing costs only, which it's really hard to put a price on the experience in my opinion, but it's very comparable to if you're going to go out to dinner. And also you can go out to dinner there after too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's just a great hack for couples for a date night too. So.
Yeah. Well, today's Friday the 13th. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So
I'll be there.
Yeah. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think that you know, yeah, and you can eat at Umvelt as well. Like, so Nisa is a restaurant that, you know, we built out the space and are leasing the space, and Batter and Jake from Food for Thought, which is in Four Corners, are amazing food provisioners, and Thibaut, the chef, is from Nice, so the name's like a play on, or I guess it's maybe like a term of endearment for Nice, France, and um, they just do stuff with food that we'd never be able to do on our own, and really excited to start like activating the full space. So like tomorrow's kind of a experiment and head in that direction, but we're really excited to like create that full experience where, you know, maybe there's entertainment upstairs and they've got the like food and beverage going, and you know, trying to tie the whole building together. So that's really exciting. So yeah, I think like the date night element is awesome, and I know, like, you know, Jenny and I live like 3 blocks away, and it's definitely, you know, it's like our main place we go hang out at
Mm.
this point. But yeah, it's great to hear you saying that, and I think you know, I think that that's like also just in celebrating Bozeman. Like, if you saw the news last week, I mean, I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 of our like great restaurants got James Beard nominations. So things like
I did
Blackbird,
see that. Yeah.
Shan's always in there. I'm trying to forget who else or remember who else, but you know, um, we're just so lucky that we've got these spots that we can just like, you know, just rely on consistently being good for, you know, a town of this size. It's pretty unbelievable. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. The local food scene here is killer.
yeah.
I tell clients that a lot, and I not to ever pull any business away from Big Sky because we do so much there, but I tell people if they want to have a really cool ski trip to ski, and you know, probably get a bunch of shit for saying could go to Bridger for a day, because you know it's always crowded apparently. Um, but if you go, you know, if you go ski Big Sky for 3 days and then come down to Bozeman for a night or two,
Hmm.
and there's about 3 reasons I say it, because go try Bridger for a day because it gets um like a lot of people just push it off, but it's a great
Well,
spot.
it's the best
And
ski area in the United States.
yeah, and then you have that food scene downtown, and then the third option, which um they're so much closer to the airport, because I could tell you stories forever about, you know, that hour plus drive from Bozeman to Big Sky, and flights and delays in the canyon, and you know, flights leaving Bozeman at 5 a.m. and you got to be up in Big Sky at 2:30. Shout out to George, because I'll see him at 3:30 tomorrow morning, because he's not taking my advice.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe next year. But if you come down and stay in Bozeman, and like the food scene, now this is just another thing to add to all the great things. And yeah, do a day of Bridger skiing and check out Bozeman, because it's it's something you might not think for a town in Montana, but the food and the culture and everything is.
Yeah. Am I allowed to ask you questions?
Yeah,
How's
sure.
this work?
Well,
Well,
I'll allow one.
okay. Well, yeah. Well, I'm genuinely curious because that's something that like thinking about how to engage the Big Sky crowd. And I'm like genuinely curious, like, are you finding that people are staying in Bozeman on their arrival, or on the return? Like, are people taking you up on that, or are you seeing most people
More
coming and
commonly
going?
now, because we're having much more of those, you know, 2:30 to 3:30 a.m. leaving Big Sky, and there's now some, you know, there's been some hotels built out right by the airport, and I think more concierge and places are recommending stuff like that, because you know, if you fly in at midnight, it makes more sense from an economical standpoint to just stay here. It's going to be much more economical than going up to Big Sky at 1 a.m. to check into your hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as from a safety standpoint for our drivers and our team, for their safety, not driving that canyon at night. So I think it's much more common that people are tying in Bozeman on the beginning and ends of their trips. And there's some cool spots here. There's the Gallatin River Lodge, which is a beautiful spot if you're in, you know, if you want to see a great representation of Montana. And there's, you know, all kinds of hotels here. So yeah, I get the answer is yes. I think a lot more people are doing that. It's really going to save them money, and it's from a safety standpoint and overall experience. If you do just add an extra day to your trip and check out Bozeman, because a lot of people go straight to Big Sky and you bypass Bozeman, but it's worth checking out for
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of reasons we've both listed.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Cool. Yeah, I think about that a lot, and I'm I'm very much everything's so new, and so now we're starting to like engage with different businesses and figure out talk to these different hotels. Luckily, we're right next to the Lark, which is just like they're an amazing partner. But I think that I think that like my hope would be that people that are going to Big Sky, because Big Sky is like this amazing, as much as I am a Bridger Bowl guy, like Big Sky, like it's the closest thing to like a European ski resort that we have in the U.S. at this point, with like the tram and the new gondola and um, the village up there. So it's such a unique thing, and I guess I just think it'd be um, in the same way that like maybe Umvelt is like kind of like feels like you're not in Montana necessarily when you're inside the building. Um, I think like Big Sky also is kind of like its own, it's, such a destination. It's kind of its own thing. And so, um, if, the hope would be, I guess, that if people, uh, going to Big Sky come down and spend some time in Bozeman, they would like have a little bit more of that like Montana experience potentially. But
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I make all kinds of recommendations if people do, and we have had clients. They'll just come down to Bozeman for the day because sometimes a family goes, but half the family doesn't ski, and there's
mhm.
like, you can have a great day or a couple days in Bozeman, and that's the perk to Bozeman, in my opinion, is if you've got kids or you want a great food scene, if you're anywhere downtown, you have you know quite a variety of options,
Mhm.
and it's all walkable.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely like an early kind of like thesis that I think we'll find out more in the summer, but definitely like my experience also has been that like people come to Bozeman and they're like, oh, what should we do? And I'm like, well, like, you know, Bridger Bowl is hardcore. Like in the summer, it's like, we have a lot of great like hiking and trailheads, but like a lot of it also gets pretty serious pretty quickly. You're like 15 minutes out of town and you're in legitimate wilderness areas. And so I do think that having like other options for experiences in I don't know in our area is just like hopefully a huge value add for people that are like visiting for the first time or coming back. So
Yeah, I think so. And then there's so many things specific to Umvelt that you can cap off a great day with.
mhm.
Skiing seems like an obvious one, but there's so much year round, and
Yeah.
there's so yeah, it's very cool. If I dig in a little more to you, how did this all conspire in your brain? Because you said it was 22 or three, but
Yeah, well, so okay, so I mean, it's a long story, pretty roundabout how I ended up in Bozeman at all, but I guess I'll try to speed run it, but
Mhm.
like Tyler, who was my first employee and came on as a co-founder and is since started a family and headed out back to California to I think believe start his own business. We met in the desert in it would have been spring break for me in 2009 in Indian Creek, Utah. So it was like my first time leading a trad rock climb. And it was my brother, my roommate, and Hayden Kennedy, who was a huge inspiration. Tragically passed away here in Bozeman a handful of years ago, and then um, it was my first time like leading a trad rock climb, and so like I was trying to get as much gear for this specific climb as possible. And Tyler ended up just being like the next guy over at the crag and gave me some uh, cams, and so we ended up talking. And I studied Chinese in college and was headed to do a year of living in China. Um, and I like mentioned this offhand to Tyler that I was like going to China this year, and he was like, "Oh no way! Like I'm gonna go do a climb. I've always wanted to go do a climbing trip there." And so, right before I left to go to China, I was like, my mom was like, "You gotta like." I was back in Seattle, and my mom was like, "You gotta clean your room out. We gotta like get this like like I don't know when you're gonna be back here. Like get your stuff out." And I was like cleaning up my room, and I found like a notepad with Tyler's number on it. So I shot him a text and was like, or left him a voicemail and was like, "Yo, like just found this number." Um, what, just like, I'm going to be in China, like, here's my email. And Tyler ended up like emailing me, and he was crab fishing, and he got off the crab boat and was like, yo, I'll be there in like 2 weeks. And so we ended up like climbing together in China. And then our lives were kind of like separately, but we'd meet up once in a while to go on expeditions or things like that. And we were going on, I mean, we went on a few different expeditions, and then we were supposed to go on this trip back to China. So like at this point, like our lives were like centered around just like working in the off season, and then like in the summer trying to do like a month long mountaineering or climbing expedition. And Tyler had like a serious injury, and so it was like this spot opened up on this expedition to far western China in Xinjiang, which is the Muslim region. That's under, it's like a pretty fascinating area under heavy Chinese surveillance at this time. But I ended up, like, I didn't know the other guys that were going on this trip, but they needed a third. So I was like, okay, I was living in Telluride, and I was like, okay, I'll go meet these guys in Jackson Hole, and we'll go do a couple days of skiing. After the mountains have closed, we'll go ski touring and see if it's a good fit. So I drove up to Jackson, ended up skiing with these guys, and we got along well. So we're like, okay, we're going to like do this trip to China in whatever it was, June. And randomly, there was two other guys from Telluride, so Kyle Payne and Garrett Lund, and we were like, oh, like we're all here, like let's go ski. So we went and skied the Middle Teton. Kyle's binding broke. It was like the craziest. We had to wire his foot in at the top of like the Middle Teton and get off of there. And then from there, we were like, okay, like, well, this is like, seems like a fun group. So like, let's just keep this going. So we ended up on this 3-week ski trip. That was the best, probably 3-week road trip of my life. Like everywhere we went, it snowed, but someone was like, you got to go to this, check out this place, Cook City. And so we were like, okay, like never heard of that. But we'll go check it out. So we drove, I guess, all the way up to Bozeman, went like, got stuff and, provisions, because we were just car camping, drove to Cook City, and it showed up and it snowed like 4 feet. And it just blew my mind. Like I'd never seen anything like it. Like, I mean, I don't know if listeners are familiar, but if you're in Montana and want a real experience, Cook City is like the coolest place on earth. So it's a town of probably 200 people in the summer, dead end road in the winter. So people drive through Wyoming, through Yellowstone Park, and then you hit, a dead end. And in the winter, at that time, it was probably 50 full-time residents, and then a bunch of people snowmobiling in from Cody, Wyoming, and it just like blew my mind. Like at that time, like sleds, snowmobile skiing was kind of like not as well known as it is now. And we were camping in the dump, so there's like a transfer station. We're car camping down there, and it was at that time, I mean, it was just like so cool. It was the whole Bomb Snow crew. So like Todd, Axel, Randy, Kyle Taylor, all the, Rob Raymond, like all these people that are now dear friends. But like at the time I was like, whoa, what is going on? There's like this whole scene where these, everyone's driving snowmobiles and skiing, like Alaska style skiing, but it's like in Montana. And it just like really planted a seed. So then, every year for the next couple of years in the spring, we'd come up to Cook City and started to like really form a love for this place. And then ended up skiing Bridger Bowl, and Bridger Bowl just like won my heart. And I was like, okay, I'm going to like move to Montana. In Telluride, my like best friend from childhood, went back to grad school, and I was like, okay, I don't want to like be here without like, my main ski partner. So it's like, I'm going to move to Bozeman. And so this would have been 2015. And this is so funny because before this podcast, I was like trying to look it up, and I was like, how did I like end up in Bozeman? And I was, it was like, I was going to do like one, I guess I should say one last, but like, I was going to try and ski Denali this summer of 2015. And I was back in Seattle training, and my brother, I remember he was like, what is this guy doing with his life? So he had set up an interview with the construction, like really high-end construction company he was working for.
For you?
Yeah, for me. It was like the big brother, like, hey, like get it together. Like, you're going to go do this interview. Like, here, put on the nice shirt. And I'll never forget, I went to like this interview, and this woman, Danielle, actually just linked me on LinkedIn. And she was like, we did the whole interview, and she's like, okay, like this guy's an idiot, but like, he's Jake's little brother, so we'll throw him a bone. And I remember she asked me, she's like, what are your like career goals? And I was like, well, I'm going to go ski Denali, and then I'm going to move to Bozeman at the end of the summer, and I'm going to start a business. And she was like, I remember she was just like, whoa, that's kind of like a lot for the next like 5 months. And like, she was like, so right. Like, I did go ski Denali and I did move to Bozeman, but then it took me like another 10 years to get around to starting a business.
Was that the Bathhouse idea then?
No. So I was designing kind of like IKEA style truck bed camper systems. So at that time I was like, so focused on that kind of like quote unquote dirtbag lifestyle, like climbing, skiing. But it was one of those things where I like learned so much doing it, but at the same time Decked came out, which is like a really nice product that's kind of a similar thing where it's like, drawers and bed systems. And so it was like validation from the standpoint that someone else was doing it. But this story's so long and roundabout, but basically ended up in Bozeman, but not doing those business ideas. And then at the same time, Tyler started, like, we'd meet up in Seattle or San Francisco and turned me on to Russian style Banya. So like Archimedes in San Francisco and Banya 5 in Seattle. So really, like, he gets the credit for, like kind of coming up with this idea of this being a great business opportunity. And we talked pretty seriously, but I shouldn't say seriously about it. We like started talking about it like in earnest as an idea in like 2019. So the idea was planted a long time ago. But COVID happened and went back to school, and and then it just kind of clicked that I was like, whoa, like this could work in Bozeman. And so that was 2023. So I don't know if that story made any sense, but
it did, and that's probably like how 90% of my stories.
Yeah.
I get 45 minutes in, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
This isn't actually why I started this.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that does.
But I think that like so it runs deeper, but I think that like it was just pretty improbable, like how I ended up in Bozeman. I think and almost didn't last, and I was like the first couple of years here, I was like, I don't know, and then Bridger Bowl like really won my heart. And then I had this feeling of like, okay, I really want to like give back to this community and try to create something that's like a sustainable business that's and like really challenge myself. Like I'm from a really entrepreneurial family, and so that's how there ended up being a bathhouse in Bozeman.
I found when I first moved here, it seemed like every other person I talked to was like, oh, I came out here with my ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend, and then we broke up, but I loved this place. And that stuck out a lot, but everyone had this somewhat accidental reason for. Mine was intentional. When I moved here was the third time I came here, but the first time I came, my sister was at MSU, and I was like, this place is so cool. And I was 18, and she had told me, you should come check it out, because we grew up in a small farm town in upstate New York, and this was like, that on steroids. The mountains are bigger, the culture, everything in the culture. And then the second time I came here, I was actually driving through to go to Washington, and my truck broke down. And I said very jokingly, I should just stay here. Why am I moving to Washington? And the thought just, that was kind of where I left it. And then I actually had to come back like a couple months later to pick up the truck that broke down here. And then my sister and brother-in-law got married here. And I said to them both, and I don't know, maybe I thought I was joking, maybe I wasn't, but I was working with my brother-in-law, and he had essentially hired me on. But I was like, if I go back to Bozeman one more time, I'm going to move there. And I came back here, and it's 4th of July wedding. Like you can't beat, early July, Montana. It's beautiful. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I went back, and I was offered a promotion and put my notice in and left. And I was like, and it was totally a gut like this. There's a vibe here. There's a reason to be here, but there's definitely no economic reason to come here or anything. Not that there's not a great economy here, but it was, it's I love hearing the way that people ended up here and what happened. And I was just thinking, when you were telling that whole story, the main reason me and Kyle had been thinking about doing some kind of bathhouse, and I don't think we ever, like, just being fully honest, if we had followed through, but we both still do and had too much going on. I don't think we ever would have done it at the level you did. So I'm so grateful that we didn't.
And that's I think I've learned a lot. Like this has been like definitely the most humbling experience of my life, and definitely when I started out, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a minimum viable product, like more of not a sauna pop up, but like in an indoor space, but like doing it like, um, for some reason I thought I could do it in like 2,200 square feet, which like people have done and proved that can work. But I do think that like you start running into capacity related issues, and I think once you get into the numbers, um, it's pretty tough if you're gonna like build proper pools that are like fully code compliant. There's a lot of like places that are doing kind of standalone cold tubs, and that's like a little bit of a gray area potentially with the pool code and the health code. Um, so once you get into like the details of like building these pools, you're like, okay, well, there's a certain amount of square footage and scale required for this. And when you start, I think like thinking about, the size of a sauna and how people fit comfortably in that space, and then how much you need for the mechanical and circulation and all these things. There is some element of in the industry of like bigger is better. And so figuring out what that sweet spot is, where it doesn't feel like a water park, which like, if you go to like, Canada at this point, there's these, companies building these like giant indoor, outdoor, 50,000 plus square foot, facilities that are like really amazing and to have some top notch amenities, but often you kind of like feel like you're a little bit at like a wellness mall has been my personal experience. And so it's like, even though these are clearly like doing very well, it didn't necessarily speak to me quite as much. And there's something between about this like 5 to 15,000 square foot. I think Bathhouse, a company that launched in Williamsburg and has one in Flatiron and is now opening in like 5 other cities like Chicago and Minneapolis. They're, incredible at building these. And they're just so well done. So like they're really doing these ones that are like 30,000 to 35,000 square feet. So like serious builds, and they work really well. So it does seem like the sweet spot is somewhere between, I think, like 8 and 30,000 square feet. And then you've got other companies like Othership that are doing these like, they're really innovating on like programming and this class-based system, but also interior design. Alley did their interior design, and they're getting really, really good at building these like, I think 8 to 15,000 square foot builds. And so I do think that like, there are some just realities of the way these things, are designed that if you go much smaller, I think the opportunity is quite limited based on capacity. And that's something honestly, like at 5,500 square feet, like we're on the low end as it is of like what's like for like a full build urban bathhouse to be really like, sustainable and profitable. There's a company, Sauna House, out of the Southeast, and Andrew Lachlan, the founder there, is like built a really, and his partner, Chad, they built like, this amazing franchise system where I think they're building on a dollar per square foot basis. Like, they're probably the best in the business in terms of like building something of the scale that Umvelt is, but doing it in like a really reproducible, high quality way. So like people are figuring this out, but like to answer your question, like I think it's hard to make it work at a smaller scale, at least without being like super hands-on forever. And so that's my question is like, how hands-on will I have to be for the next 10 years to make one at 5,000 square feet work,
That's a really good point because I see it in all types of business, mine included, but there's that sweet spot where there's that intimacy and that size that it's not so big that it just feels like a machine. But yeah, there's the economics have to make sense too, because you put that much money and time in, and then you know you got to make it back, and it's got to be profitable. So that's, yeah, I'd imagine that's a real balance, and Yeah. I think you guys knocked it out of the park from, from a user standpoint, because I love the size. I love that there's room for people, but it doesn't feel like, there's 200 people and everyone's talking, and it just feels like I get that works in some places and makes sense, but this is a very, um, I like it, but I could see where that's a can be a tough intersection to be at between, you need to be profitable, and that's the same thing I kind of alluded to with the podcast, is how can I give back and be part of the community, but have a profitable business so I can take care of my team and myself, and be properly compensated for working 80
Mhm.
hours a week. And I didn't get to the end of my point of why I was saying me and Kyle started it naturally, but the main reason was we were really thinking, man, there's not a, you know, every every place to socialize feels like a bar. I personally barely drink, and have no problem with people that do, but I wouldn't necessarily want to go sit in a bar, and that's where I felt that lack, is that community space, and that's why I think this is so cool. So I'm just gonna keep circling back to.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so another common theme in this space is like, uh, at least you look at if you listen to interviews with other people that built bathhouses, a very common thread is that a lot of people that start these things are in some form of recovery. So I quit drinking, I guess it'd be like 9 years ago this July, and definitely like um, that's been like a super positive change for me. And I didn't have a healthy relationship with alcohol, and definitely um, tend towards the addictive. So, and you see it, both in people starting these businesses, but also in users. Like you go to the hot springs, and there's like, Bozeman hot springs, and there's like clearly a really awesome representation of like the recovery community. And so whether or not like someone has an issue with substances or not, or other, addictive behaviors, I do think that like this, one of the huge driving factors for me was like, oh, I live in this community that I love, but because I don't participate in, the like alcohol culture anymore, like found myself quite isolated from a lot of the community. Gallatin County's, I believe the fifth most alcoholic county in the country, depending on if you believe you know,
Yeah, I've heard
the
the same
stats.
thing. Yeah.
So, and that's, like you said, like not to cast judgment, but just like something to be aware of, that like, for me, I was like, oh, this would be great to have, a like healthy, sober, curious third space where people can be out. And even if you're not like an extrovert, a space where you can be out and feel like you can be authentically yourself, um, and just, yeah, be in community, like sitting with, other people. So, that was, I'm glad that like, thanks for bringing that up. Cause that, is one of those things that, was certainly part of the intention. And, one of our big values is like show, don't tell. And so trying to create a space that's, so intentional, and show through the way that like our staff, operates the space, in the way that we carry ourselves in the space, that like people are picking up that like, um, this is a space that's not to like go be inebriated,
Mm.
and has this aspirational quality where it's like, okay, like, this is a space where I can go like do the work on myself, and hopefully um, contribute to like that growth. So, um, yeah, I mean, that for me, that was like a huge factor, especially coming out of COVID, where I was like, okay, like, this has been a really isolated time, um, and having just like, yeah, a spot to be out around people that, um, felt good.
Yeah, I agree. It's so cool. I think anyone who's gotten into, cold plunge sauna has experienced all those benefits that, yeah, that can be addictive in a positive way in its own sense, because I mean, there's all kinds of science, but when you couple that, and that's what Stephen Gill talked about too, is for him, it's more about the community than, all these obvious, health benefits. But when you couple those two, you just have this combative effect of positivity. I remember when I've gotten a little more acclimated because I've been doing it more regularly, but it was like the first or second time I saw you down there, and I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and I'm just like tripping a little bit, because
Yeah, yeah,
I just did the, like 20 minutes in the sauna and a few in the cold. And if you're not used to it, if nobody's experienced that, like obviously please be safe and do it with a friend, but it's like it can be borderline psychedelic
Oh
the
yeah.
way it hits you, and it's very interesting. But the way you feel after, I'll tell you this because this was a funny experience to the bathhouse. I was there a while ago with my fiance, and it was one night, and something was, and like not to like knock your staff or call them out at all, something was going on with the music, and it like clipped out a few times. And I'm like, oh man, that's like, I was like, it's whatever, but it's like, it's a little distracting because sometimes the music is really well done. That's something I didn't mention, but it's such a good vibe and it's such a good variety. And I was like, I should probably just say something to one of the gals working here. They're great, um, and just as informative, not as like to complain because I'm a business owner and I know, and then we'll get done the sauna a few times, the cold plunge a few times, and I go upstairs and I'm in such a mood and a vibe. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna say anything. I
Just
don't
let it
care.
slide.
I'm like, yeah, it's like I'm like, look, it doesn't even matter. It was fine. And then to your staff's credit, one of them, she said, I'm so sorry about the music. Something was skipping out. I'm like, oh, I was like, I was like, it happens. But I was like, kudos to your staff for, taking full ownership. But it was so interesting that I was thinking that initially, and after I'm like, it does. But so just see the state change that took
Yes.
place in me was very, very cool telling experience. So
Yeah. Well, that's the goal.
yeah.
That's so funny. I mean, honestly, yeah, I was so lucky. Like the staff that came on, like this initial team is just like truly incredible. I'm so lucky. And on the music front, generally when there's issues, it's because I've been messing with it on my phone and I like leave the
Yeah.
building and it causes something.
I
So,
figured it was like a Bluetooth.
no,
or
it's
something,
probably
so,
my fault.
yeah.
So, but yeah, that's definitely like, that kind of like semi narcotic effect of sauna and cold plunge is definitely one of the huge perks. And I do think it's why you see people from the recovery community like enjoying it. But I mean, regardless, I think like if that's the reaction we're having, we're maybe slower to react to a situation, or that's like a great byproduct of this whole tradition, I guess. So
Yeah, that used to be a post jujitsu thing a lot when I'd leave those tough training sessions and stuff. And my my new lens of reality was so different that like little incidental things would not seem extraneous at the quote unquote like after being in the face of death and that type of struggle. And it's very different but similar in this sense that you went through that hard struggle, and there's that, as the science says, there's that dopamine kick, but you just, I don't know, it's such a vibe.
Mhm.
It's like, that's why I'm gonna go back to the date night thing. Like, the way I'll sleep that night and feel the next day. I've used it deliberately half a dozen times, I'll say, when work's gotten really stressful, and I'm like, I'm really good about exercise and fitness with self-care, but that's something that's not like really pushing the go button. And it's almost invaluable because I can just go there, turn off, leave my phone and disconnect. And I'm like, this is, I'm so grateful for that it's there for like those situations. And I would say that to anyone, if you're going through something, or stress is whatever, like it's a great way to kind of check out and check in at the same time, not to get like too esoteric and spiritual, but like it really is, because you can sit there and be quiet and go inside and also kind of turn off the outside world. So kudos. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I listened to, you and talking to Steven from Earthborn Saunas, and I've really struggled with like deciding on whether or not to like lean into like the science and the health benefits, because to me it's always been like, like I like love Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
Like I like watch like everything Brian Johnson does. And it's like, I think obviously like no one's perfect. Like there's things to be like, all right, like that's a little, but generally I'm like, okay, this guy is just like so fascinating. And like, he also is, I think he has like a great sense of humor about what he's doing in himself. But to me, like trying to communicate the health benefits, like, because I do think they're so like specific to the individual, and it's very different for men and women. And also just like, I really struggle to like, I can read, all about it, but then I really struggle to like communicate the science, the health benefits. But, I'm curious about whether or not that's like important to our customers. And so What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would depend on the individual because I think everyone's going to do it for a different reason. But it is. I heard someone call a sauna doing like a sauna, let's say session and an executive workout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's great. Uh, but there's a lot of science there. I don't know. That's I guess like the only thing I could think of is like kind of see what the feedback from the community is. But
Hmm.
I think there's like in my mind, there's so many things, and most of my family knows it about me because I just listen to all this neuroscience and all this stuff, and I'm like pretty regimented with my food and with rarely drinking and all that. But I've learned like that it can be a mistake to push stuff on other people too much. So I just find that balance, and I'm like if people are interested, they'll usually ask. But from a business standpoint, I don't know. Probably somewhere in the middle. But
I mean, I think what's exciting about this moment in time is like, there's finally a body of new data collection and science coming out about the health benefits of sauna and cold plunge. So I think that like it will get easier
yeah,
because right now everything kind of draws on like, I shouldn't say everything, but like a lot of what you hear is referencing, one 20-year study from Finland that's like on a very small.
it's a very famous study.
Yeah, it's like a very small cohort of like not very diverse, participants, and so it'll be really interesting to see what happens as like, there's a proliferation of this practice outside of kind of like communities that traditionally partook in sauna and cold plunge, and so I think it'll get easier, and it'll probably there's probably some middle ground. So far, I've been like, I don't want to like
Yeah.
talk science, but
I don't know how if you guys know any of those guys at Element or anything about that, but and I don't know you guys have some Element stuff there. I don't know if you've seen in some when you order some of their stuff, they would have some cards with some information about salt and some valuable science on it and stuff. And I like that approach because it felt optional. Like you could check this out if you want, but it's also not like I'm trying to jam it down your throat. And like obviously I'm the ideal client to then provide that to because I'm already there buying their product. So I don't know, maybe if it was optional stuff there. I
yeah,
also don't completely ask me.
they're great. It's so wild. They're
Yeah.
headquartered in Bozeman. I
I
don't know
know.
if have you met James?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I mean he came down like when we were, so we hand excavated that basement 24 inches and then like dug the pools down another 6.5 feet. So we were like down in 16.5 feet below street level, like almost 2 months of running conveyor belts and getting rocks out. And James came down during that phase at some point, and I was like, no way, this guy's here. And like we started talking, and like so down to earth. He's like a Burning Man guy, and he's got like his staff is just like electric. It's such a cool. They're in a bunch, and they do a good job with like having the information there if you want it. So that's a good suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, somewhere in the middle there. I was talking to a guy in the sauna and he was asking me about the hats. And I was telling him like, man, like the theory I understand is like your head will get hot a lot faster than your body. Your body could get, some more benefits if you stay in a little bit longer. I was like, and just to be clear, like this is repeated kind of bro science that I've heard. So like take this all.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, from what I understand, like the palms of your hands and the palms of your feet don't have any hair follicles. So that's where the heat like really comes in the cold. I was like, but like please
Yeah.
take that at the random thing you heard from some random guy in the sauna. But like that's the way I understand of it. Some of it I think is very cool. Some of it's kind of exhausting. And I saw some video the other day, the guy saying like, well, you like if you're a guy, you gotta like you can't let your testicles get too warm. So I put an ice pack. I take an ice pack in there and I'm like, all right, man, like relax.
Well, this is so funny because Brian Johnson just did like
did
the study, and like the stats were kind of wild, but
yeah, it's about sperm count, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is so funny because like Huberman did an episode. I mean, must be probably 4 years ago. So it was like before I had started, like really gotten serious about Umvelt, And I remember like he talked about this whole phenomenon and cited some studies. And I was like, oh my God, I should just like make the ice jock where it'd be like a jock strap with an ice pack. Cause I was like going to the hot springs like 5 days a week at that point. And I was like, oh, like, this is like, we're learning so much more about sperm health and motility. And now I think people are also discovering that like those things are tied very much into testosterone levels. So I was like, it was kind of ironic because like I was like, oh, this is like a funny, like a great brand name and a funny idea. But like I just bought a set of shorts that have a zipper pocket with like a special ice pack.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Do you use it?
Oh yeah, I use it all the time.
That's so funny.
And so like I'm like
now I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. So like it's so funny that I was like, wow, this is like a way bigger idea than a single bathhouse. Is like I could have done ice jock.
Yeah. That's funny. But I mean, I want to have kids. So, but I was also like, if that's what's going to keep me from having kids, maybe I wasn't meant to have kids.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's like a few products out there. I mean, so, I think as like stuff comes out, I'm just experimenting with everything and want to stay up to date. But, with like the hats, I do think with a lot of this stuff, like this is such an ancient practice that there's kind of a little bit of like a Lindy effect thing going on where I'm like, look, like if it's like the Russians and the Finns have been wearing these, hats for like 4,000 years or whatever the number is, like, I'm just going to do it too. It's a good vibe.
Yeah.
It looks fun. It's like, so.
Sometimes it's cool to just honor the culture.
Yeah.
And like, I think you guys did that a lot with the whole place. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that anyone should know about Umvelt, or are you, like, is there anything within the community, if anyone listens to this, that you're looking for as far as, staffing, suggestions, help with XYZ?
Oh man, there could be a podcast on all of those. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think, I hope that people know that like, this is, something like for the Bozeman community. Like, I'm like a Bridger Bowl skier. I live on North Grand. Like, this isn't like, this isn't some outside investors institutional money. Like, this is like, I'm a community member, and I really do care about this community, and I'm excited to really engage with the community and figure out how to like, hopefully collaborate with other businesses. Like we already are like, field a lot of donation requests for raffles for nonprofits and causes and things like that. And we'd love to be able to help with stuff like that, but really excited to figure out like how to activate the whole space to bring in community members and like let people really take, I think ownership of the space. So, we're still a really small team and we're bringing people on, and hopefully there'll be like, people that exist to really like serve the role of community engagement and making this a thing that's like woven in with the broader Bozeman and Montana communities. What else?
You made me think too. Shout out to Sarah with Refillery.
Yes.
You guys have her stuff in there.
She's the best.
Yeah, she did the podcast a while back, and it's such a cool concept when she started. And like, I was like, oh, that's so cool. You guys have her stuff in there, and
yeah, Sarah's great.
It's very cool to see the like community working together in that sense.
Yeah, so things like that, I think. Yeah, I think we'll just hope, if you haven't been in yet, would love to host you. We welcome feedback at all times. And yeah, I think that like, if you haven't been, to anyone listening, the Montana Fest is pretty incredible. It's a young festival. I think this is going to be like the 3rd or 4th year, but Pat and Guy Murphy, and his team do an amazing job. And if you like are someone that's maybe feeling cynical or down about change or the direction Bozeman's going, I think it's a real shot in the arm. Like it's, you see all these people that are putting their energy into this community and do have like, I think a really optimistic vision, because like, there's a lot of exciting opportunity here. We have this amazing university, the strange history of photonic laser crystal growth in the valley means that like Bozeman could become some sort of epicenter for, photonics and quantum computing. And these things might be like super relevant in the AI future. And, I think that these are things that like are potentially, like could cause a lot of change, but also like bringing in more great companies and smart people. Like MSU's 65% engineering. We have like this rich culture of like, engineering, environmental engineering, all these things. And I think we should be like really proud of this place and the like the potential that like this is like a kind of cool tech hub, industrial um space with like a lot of opportunity for great high paying jobs and being able to like comfortably live in such an awesome spot where you've got a ski area, you've got two ski areas within an hour and a half and rivers and you know we've got like a killer symphony, we've got the art scenes popping off, the jazz scene's incredible, so many creative folks. So I do think that like, yeah, Montana Fest is really cool. I highly just want to plug that because I went last year and it was like really the shot in the arm I needed to be like, okay, I'm like excited to be, here, and Umvelt was like built to last. This is not, it was a serious construction project and it's built to, hold up. Like my hope was that this would be, a, you know, a community hub for, at least 50 years. So, I think that like, yeah, those are just some things I'd like to put out there.
I'm glad you said that too, and that was the exact impression I got with Montana Festival. That it was such an optimistic and productive way to look at growth and change, versus just complaining. Like if like the some of the ethos in my company is like don't bitch unless you have a solution, like because otherwise then you're just bitching. And these are proactive solutions, and if it's inevitable, let's make it intentional and productive and beneficial to the community at large. So I felt that exact same way. So I'm glad you brought that up. What I know, I looked this up. Can you explain Umvelt, the
Oh
name?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this is also a funny story. So originally, the company was called Melthouse, and I should also say that like this bathhouse would not exist if it was not for the band Fish, PH Fish. Um, I've just been a student of that band and the community and their like, dedication to quality and authenticity for over 15 years now. And definitely like the practice of going and seeing that band, gave me the like inspiration and confidence to try to do something for my community. So without those guys, there would definitely not be a bathhouse here. But one of my favorite Fish songs is "Split Open and Melt." So I was like, "Oh, Melt House is like a great name." Turns out, there's a chocolatier in Pennsylvania that has a trademark on the word "melt" for anything spa related. So there's like no cease and desist. I was not, there was no legal action, but the lawyers were like, "Hey, I wouldn't go down this road." And it ended up being like one of these like kind of like gut punches that was a real blessing in disguise. So like I was deep into talking with, kind of like graphic designers, logo designers, stuff like that, working on Melthouse. And I was like, oh my God, I got this news. I have to change the name. And one of the best things that could happen to me, but I was like searching for something, and Umvelt was the oldest. I'm kind of a URL hoarder. I'm always buying URLs. And so the oldest URL I actually owned was Umvelt. I had a few different iterations of the word, but I learned about it on this podcast. God, I don't even know what year it would be now, but Rob Reed had this podcast After On, and it was like this flash in the pan. There's like only like probably like 25 episodes, but it's like some of the best podcasting ever, in my mind. And he did this episode with a scientist who was studying aesthetics and the birds of paradise, and kind of like had this theory that like there's something we don't understand about about aesthetics, where creatures are like evolving towards traits that are not advantageous in terms of like they're just purely for beauty. And they got to talking, and then they brought up this word of Umwelt, which is like a German word with a W, and essentially it means the sensory environment. So it's this idea in semiotics. There's these kind of, I think it was like the 20s in Germany, these scientists started researching like what it means to be an organism, like experienced in its environment. And it's this idea that like every organism's having a unique experience of its environment based on its senses. So like there's like a shrimp with like 16 different senses. We like tend to say we have like 5 or 6 depending on how you count them. But I just thought that was like such a great fit because this, we're like creating a space that like really like the product is like a sensory experience. And everyone, even like person to person, has a different umvelt. Like you're kind of, based on how you're tuned. And so since the beginning, I was reading books about experience design and like really engaging all the senses. And so we try to do that with like incense, the lighting, like all the lights are under 2300 Kelvin. The color palette, like something, is like blue. If you like have really red light, blue turns black. So everything just like washes out. So like leaning into like those warm red tones and soft textures. There's a ton of texture everywhere. And so, yeah, just like, I think it's just like a really cool name, and I'm excited to see how we can like, do that through the branding, but also through experiences in the space. So thinking about things we're doing with music or, whether it's sound bowls or aromatherapy in the sauna, and, trying to like really just always consciously like return to be like, okay, like how are we engaging everyone's senses while they're in this space? I guess inside or looking at their phone. So that's how we got the name.
That makes complete sense, man.
Okay.
Where's the website if people want to
Oh
find
yeah,
you?
so it's www.umvelt.co.
Was that, so did you have that domain forever?
Yeah.
Because of that podcast?
Yeah, because of that podcast, I was like,
sick.
oh, this is such a great name. Like I was like,
So that was destiny.
It was destiny.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
And you guys are on Instagram?
We're on Instagram, not on TikTok yet.
Yep.
Maybe someday.
The place speaks for itself, but I think you did a great job describing it even more. So
yeah.
I'm glad you're here. Excited to share this, and hell yeah.
Yeah, come visit. Love to have you.
Cool. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, folks. You can find the full blog post for every episode along with key takeaways and links at mountain-mule.com. If you haven't yet, consider following the show. That one small action helps these Montana businesses get seen, grow, and thrive, and it helps this podcast keep going too. If you know a business that would be a good fit for the show, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out through the website or social. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses. See you on the next show.